You're listening to JS Party, a weekly celebration of JavaScript and the web. Find us on the web at jsparty.fm, on the Fediverse at jsparty, at changelog.social, and of course, wherever you get your podcasts, just search for JS Party, you'll find us. Thanks to our partners at Fly. Launch your app near your users for peak performance. Fly makes it easy. Learn more at fly.io. Okay, hey, it's party time, y'all.
What's up, friends? I'm here with a good friend of mine, Faraz Abukadije. Faraz is the founder and CEO of Socket. Socket helps to protect some of the best engineering teams out there with their developer-first security platform. They protect your code from both vulnerable and malicious dependencies. So we've known each other for a while now, Faraz. Well, let's imagine somehow I've landed myself at Vercel. And because I'm a big fan of you, I understand what Socket is, but I don't know how to explain it to anybody else there. I've brought you into a meeting. We're considering Socket because we want to secure our dependencies. We want to ship faster. We want everything that you promise from Socket. How do you explain Socket to my team at Vercel?
Yeah, Socket is a developer-first security platform that stops vulnerable and malicious open source dependencies from infiltrating your most critical apps. So we do that by focusing on real threats and keeping out all the types of risks that are out there in open source dependencies. Everything from malicious dependencies, typo squat attacks, backdoors, risky dependencies, dependencies with hidden behavior. There's all kinds of risks out there. A lot of reasons why a dependency might be bad news. And Socket can help you as a developer just keep all that out of your app and keep things nice and clean and pristine amongst your dependencies.
I saw recently Dracula. I'm a fan of Dracula. I don't know about you, but I love that theme. Big fan of Zena Rocha. And I saw there was like a misspelling there. And so because Dracula is installed on VS Code in lots of different places, I saw there was a typo squat sitting there that had different intentions than obviously Dracula did. Is that an example of what you mean?
Absolutely, yeah. Dracula, that's a perfect example. It's super common these days to see that type of an attack where you see a common dependency that you have an attacker just pretending to be that dependency, typoing the name of it by one letter and then trying to get unsuspecting developers to install it. Unfortunately, we're seeing more and more of these types of attacks in the community, and they're taking advantage of the trust in open source. As developers, we need to be more aware of the dependencies we're using and make sure that we're not pulling in anything that could risk the data of our users or cause a big breach at our companies. And so part of that is obviously being more careful and asking questions and looking more carefully at the dependencies we use. But also part of that is tooling. It's really a hard problem to solve just on your own as a single developer. And so bringing in a tool like Socket can really help automate a lot of that work for you. It just sort of sits there in the background. It's really, really quiet. It doesn't create a lot of noise. But if you were to pull in something that was backdoored or compromised in some way, we would jump into action right in the PR or right in your editor, or even as early as you browse the web. We have a web extension that can actually give you information if you're looking at a package that's dangerous, or if you're browsing Stack Overflow and you see somebody saying, hey, just install this dependency to solve your problems. A lot of times even that can be a way to get the attacker's code onto your machine. So Socket jumps in at all those different places and can tell you if something is dangerous and stop you from owning yourself.
Yes, don't get yourself owned. Use Socket. Check them out. Socket.dev. Big fan of you, Faraz. Big fan of what you're doing with Socket. Proactive versus reactive, to me, is the ultimate shift left for developers. It is totally developer first. Check it out. Socket.dev. Install the GitHub app, too easy, or book a demo. Once again, socket.dev. That's SOCKET.dev.
Hoy hoy, it is time for another exciting JS party. I'm your host this week, Nick Nisi, and joining me today is Jared Santo. Jared, what's up?
Oh, just trying out new browsers, as we do, Nick, as we do. Download them all. Gotta download them all.
It's a collection, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And speaking of new browsers, we're talking about a, not so new browser. It actually is I've been using it for quite a while, but it's a browser called Polypane, and we have its creator, Killian Valkhoff, on. Killian, how's it going?
Hi. I'm very stressed out, to be honest. Just to get that out of the way, I'm in the middle of getting a mortgage, and it's going about as well as you can expect.
Not the best time to get a mortgage.
No, it's all very interesting, but yeah, that's life.
That is life for sure.
But other than that, I'm good.
Awesome. Well, yeah, good luck with that.
Thanks.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I'm Killian. I'm a web developer from the Netherlands. I've been building websites for a very long time. Started all the way back in front page, like building my own sites as a kid. Then grew up a little bit and started building websites for other people. When I was around 16, started a web agency. So, just building websites, and then later iPad apps and iPhone apps, because when I started, those things didn't exist. Did that for quite a long time. Was always building like apps on the side, little tools that I myself needed, Polypane being one of them. And then in 2019, I quit the agency and I started working on Polypane full-time. So that's what I've been doing for the past 5 years now.
Nice. Well, yeah, it's awesome. We should probably mention what it is. It is a developer-focused browser built on Chromium, I assume. And yeah, why don't you tell us what it is?
Yeah, sure. Well, I always enjoy listening to other people describe it because it's great to, I get very myopic about it because, it's all I see all day, every day. So kind of like the important stuff just sort of disappears for me. But I'll try. So Polypane is a browser for developers, like you said, and it's a browser for developers in the sense that it provides all these tools that you need to build good websites and web apps. That means that in Polypane, you don't see your web page just like in a single tab, but you see your web page in like as many different sizes as you need. So that can be like different mobile phones or tablets or all the way up to 4K screens. And you can like resize them all inside your window. So you can really see them all. And then anything you do in one of those screen sizes, which I call panes, and that's where the name Polypane comes from. Anything you do happens in all of them. So you see your site in all these different permutations, but it's like you're interacting with just a single tab. So it's a massive speed boost while you're developing because you no longer have to, for example, like resize your browser to check the mobile size still works, or flip your browser or your operating system to dark mode or back to light mode to check your light and dark mode, because you can show all of those things side by side. So you can have a really good overview of like everything or all the permutations of your web page. And then on top of that, I have all these other tools for things that you need to care about as a developer. So there's a ton of accessibility tooling where it tells you like, these are the things that aren't working well right now. And then this is how you should fix them. Because I think like that's a very important part of, in particular, accessibility. Like there's a lot of resources and things that tell you how not to do stuff. But then when it comes to, how to actually do stuff, it's either it depends or here's 5 options and you figure out which is the right one for your situation. So I try to be very prescriptive, or as prescriptive as I can, because that way developers can actually, fix the things, make it better for people and still get the ticket done, still make the deadline. So that's Polypane in a nutshell. I could go on because there's like hundreds of other features, but let's pause there for now.
Okay. Awesome. I want you to go on eventually because I learned something new in there. I've been using Polypane for a while, and other developer specific browsers, and just the, the built-in dev tools in, other browsers, Chromium browsers, Arc, Firefox, and other ones. And in what you were saying, I just learned something new. I didn't realize that in Polypane, like, when you open it up, I have my website opened up in it right now, and it starts, just at least on mine, it's 3 different sizes. It's mobile, tablet, and laptop. And that's how I primarily use it. But my site does have a dark theme and a light theme, and I did not realize that I could set the prefers dark mode per pane, which is awesome because I've just been switching back and forth. So I learned something new. I think that as we go, there's probably like a million other features that I will learn about. And yeah, so that's really cool. Jared, have you used any browsers like this before?
Well, yes and no, not very much. I mostly stick to Brave for development and Safari as my daily driver. I used to use Firefox and I have used Safari's dev tools, but at a certain point, the Chrome team's dev tools set themselves apart, and that's what I want, but I don't want Chrome directly, and so I use Brave in order to get that. Now, I've been using Polypane for at least 45 minutes. And I will say that while I was hesitant to download it, because Nick Killian, full disclosure, Nick told me about this tool probably 6 months ago on a show where we were just talking about our web browsers that we use. And I didn't sign up for it at the time or download it because I was like, oh man, gotta have an email address and a code and stuff just to even try it out.
I have an email address. You probably have multiple.
I got all kinds of stuff, but that's the problem is like, do I want one more thing just for a single episode?
Sure.
And the answer then was no. But now I'm like, well, the creator's coming on. I have to at least try the thing. And so I've been using it in earnest for about an hour as I'm developing on our website. And I gotta say, man, it's pretty cool.
Thanks.
I like having the different panes up, the default, and I can see you can add other ones if you have specific sizes or breakpoints that you're particularly caring about. That is cool. And then the synchronization is cool.
So that's one of the features that I could dive into. So Polypane, it does the thing you expect. Like you can add panes that are like iPhone 12, Pixel 8, whatever. But because Polypane is a browser, it has access to all of your CSS. So I also parse your CSS and get all the breakpoints that you've written in your CSS. And you can make panes from your own breakpoints. So you can test all the things that you actually, explicitly designed for.
That's cool. So how do you do that?
So you can press Command B.
Oh, I see it in the file. Create panes from CSS breakpoints.
Yeah.
Or Command B is the shortcut. So you're taking me the shortcut way. That is nifty. Bam. Uh-oh. Now I got a bunch of panes.
Yeah, that can get a very long list. So whenever there's more than, I think, 10 or 15 breakpoints, Polypane goes, are you sure you want to do this? Because, with 15 panes, you're not going to get a real overview. So what I do instead there, so for example, the Polypane website itself has 24 breakpoints, which is way too much. I didn't code that very well, but it is what it is. So when you try to open 24 panes, Polypane goes, well, do you really want to do that? Or do you just want to see like panes in the range of the breakpoints? So it takes all your breakpoints and then it buckets them into 5 groups. And then it takes the average of each group as a size for a pane. So then you only add like 5 or 6 panes, but you still get the full range of like all the breakpoints you designed for.
Yeah, that's very cool. So I'm looking at our admin right now and it looks like we have 10 breakpoints. It's actually manageable. Like I can just scroll sideways. I have a pretty big monitor and I maybe eventually would just just close a couple of these. Yeah. But it's definitely a cool feature. I also like the synchronization. Like you scroll one and they all scroll. I find that to be very cool, but I'm glad that you can also just toggle that one off because at first I was like, this is awesome. Then I was like, actually, it's a little bit distracting when I'm just trying to like test a form out is to have them all moving. So I was like, you got to be able to turn that off. And sure enough, it was pretty easy to find that. So overall, super impressed. I can tell you've been working on it a long time because it seems like you've sweated a few of the details that, like a version 1.0 probably wouldn't have.
Well, so by the time I released the 1.0, I had already been working on it for 4 years as like a side project. So for example, that breakpoint stuff was already in 1.0, but then many of the other things weren't. So, since I've been able to work on it full time, I've definitely added like a ton of features and a ton of improvements.
And does it have the built-in Chrome dev tools in there or are you doing your own thing?
Both. So it's built on Chrome. And as you mentioned, like the Chromium DevTools are really, really good. So it would be stupid to go like, nah, you don't need those. So you can use those if you want, but the Chromium DevTools have one major downside, and that is that the model for the Chromium DevTools is that one web page has one DevTools. So that kind of falls apart if you have your site shown in multiple panes, because now you can only ever edit one pane at a time, which is not the experience you want. Like, you see all these panes, but you really want to just be interacting with your website or your web page. And it doesn't matter what you like, how many times it's shown. So I've also built my own DevTools. So I have my own Elements Inspector and my own console. And what they do is they consolidate what happens in all of the panes. So with the Polypane Elements panel, you can inspect and edit DOM elements across all your panes. So you can like very quickly change some text or change some colors or change some font sizes and see how that works across all your panes, like eliminating the like resize to check if everything still works problem. And then the console is kind of like the other way around, where if you have console messages, they all end up in the same console. And then rather than showing like the same message 3 times, once for each pane, I also check if, each pane emits the same message, and then I combine those. So in the console, if you do a window.title, then you just get one return value. And then if you do a window.innerHeight, you get 3 if you have 3 different panes with 3 different heights. So I'm, trying to make sure that you can use the stuff that you're used to, that you're super familiar with, and then also provide you with what I think is a better experience.
That's cool stuff. Nick, what part of Polypane are you using the most? You've been using it longer than I have. I've got 45 minutes under my belt. Like, what are the features that surface to you? And obviously not dark mode, but what else?
Yeah, clearly. So one big thing that like really got me into looking at it is another feature that you have, I think, in your info panel. Yeah, the social media previews. Mm-hmm. I was working on those panes for a while, like for what's it going to look like if I share a link to Twitter or to Facebook. And at one point, I think Twitter had like DevTools that would show you like what it would look like, and had like
Twitter card validator or something like that.
Yes.
Yeah,
that's
so
it.
it's very ironic that Twitter has those, Facebook has those, LinkedIn has those, and they've all been abandoned for years, and they're like extremely out of date, and they usually don't even like validate in the same way as the actual sites do. But they're still online, and they're still like mentioned in all the documentation.
Yeah, I was just using LinkedIn's the other day as I was tweaking stuff, and in the validator, I think they call theirs like post something. I don't know what it's called. In theirs, our stuff looked great, and then I would go put it into the actual, post editor and paste it in there, and it would pull in, and it would look terrible. And I was like, well, obviously the validator is what I would want to work, but now what do I do?
Yeah, so LinkedIn recently changed the design of their embedded links, where previously they took your OG image and they displayed it like very large, just like a Twitter card.
Yes.
But they got rid of that, presumably for engagement reasons, because apparently it's also a whole thing where links in messages in LinkedIn are suppressed. So you got to put the link in a comment to make sure people even see them.
They don't want you to click on links. They don't want you leaving LinkedIn.
The worst.
I know.
So now, like, if you share a link, you also get like a tiny little image rather than a big one.
That's exactly what I was looking at. If you go back to their validator, it still shows the big one.
Yeah. So I keep my social media previews up to date, like whenever I find that there's a change, just so that, things are pixel perfect and things do match up with reality and not with like the 20% hack project of one guy at LinkedIn that left 10 years ago thinks it should look like.
I appreciate that. And that makes it really easy, because you get to see, X or Twitter, Facebook, Slack. Slack was a big one I was working on for a while. And just being able to see all of those. You mentioned like they don't like the engagement of you clicking a link out. And I hate that so much.
Yeah.
It's the worst. And I hate that people play that game instead of just abandoning it.
We all got tricked into that, right? With the advent of social media, it was all like, you can share everything and we'll make it super easy and connect the world. And now it's like, you just stay. Don't go anywhere.
Yeah.
It's like we want people to come to our websites. How do you do that anymore? I'm at a point now where for changelog stuff, I'm just starting to think, what if we just stop posting announcements about our new episode? Like, let's just stop because the upside is so minuscule at this point to the amount of effort, especially with the APIs getting locked down. So you can't even auto post. You have to like go manually post. And it's like, they don't want you clicking on the links anyways, and no one's there anymore. They're all scattered everywhere. And so huge effort and very, very small upside for us humble indie creators is like, we just want you to come to our websites.
Exactly.
But no, they don't.
We just all have to go back to RSS.
Yeah.
I'm all in on that. I would love that.
We just got to get everybody doing it. How do we do that? Well, we go to LinkedIn and say, use RSS, and then we link out to a thing that they can't click on. Anyways, off topic. Where do you see that feature, Nick? I can't toggle it on. It's in the info panel.
So if you press Command K and then type meta.
Oh, you got a Command K dealy too.
See, I didn't know about that either.
Oh, you're learning. We're learning so much. This is cool.
I will say, like, another reason I came to like looking into these is kind of like what Jared said. Like, I'm a big fan of Chrome's dev tools, but I have not wanted Chrome on any of my machines for years now. So like finding other ways to do that. I like Arc a lot. I don't like developing within Arc for some reason. I don't know. I don't know. I'm starting to use Arc more as a daily driver too. So that's maybe clouding it. But like, I really liked the idea of having a browser that is like my reference browser, where I'm going to look up information. And for years that's been Safari, but then I specifically just want somewhere that I can Command tab to, that is not the same browser that I'm currently using. So I wouldn't want to Option tab to Safari. I'd want a Command tab because it's just more natural. And so like a dedicated browser just for that is like super appealing to me. And that's like the main reason I started looking for a solution like this. And then I saw this, and I think I saw one other one, but it like the tools that it gives me, like that, being able to see the social media previews and being able to see the multiple panes at once are really, really enticing. And you can turn those off. Like I forget what it is. Is it just B?
Just B
just
for
hitting
browser.
B. Yeah.
I mean,
sense.
Shortcuts are difficult, man.
Yeah.
Just at some point you just run out of keys and you're like, what do I do now?
But yeah, that lets you go just full screen, like a normal single pane, like a normal browser.
Mm-hmm.
And then like a lot of times things that I'm working on might be like, I refer to it as like the back end of the front end, where it's not really like UI changes, so I don't care to see 5 different panes and reload all 5 every time. So being able to just consolidate it down to the one pane and then kind of basically looking at the console or doing interactions and making sure that actually works. Mm-hmm. And it's really nice being able to switch between both of those. I am curious though about, so you decided to work on this and you've been working on it full time for quite a while now. What led you to decide that you're just going to build a browser?
I mean, so as I said, I've always been building small tools for myself. So I wrote an image compression GUI. I made a charting library using SVG at some point. So it's just, I've always made stuff that I needed. And then this was just like personal frustration and seeing, like at the time, I started this project in 2015. Back then, Sketch was the hot new thing. And something Sketch did, which was really cool, was artboards. So whereas like Photoshop was still very like single image centric, like you defined your size of your web page, and then you start designing that single thing. And then if you also needed a mobile design, you opened a new file. Whereas in Sketch, it would just be one huge canvas and you would add a bunch of artboards like side by side for your desktop and your mobile and your tablet and whatever. And when doing that, what I noticed was that it was really easy while designing to like see the relationship between the different sizes for specific elements. And that was really helpful in like making sure that everything was consistent and that everything looked nice, because at that time, none of the apps had things like design tokens or variables or whatever. None of that existed yet. So I really enjoyed that workflow, but then I went back to the browser and I was back to like dragging my browser back and forth, and like stuff like that starts to really irk me at some point where I'm like, this is just dumb. Why am I doing this? This is like the 50th time that I've done this today, and I'm sick of it. And that's where the idea came from. Like, what if I just duct tape 3 iframes together and add an address bar? What happens? So I did that, and it was fun. It was nice to use, and it was just like some tool that I built for myself that, you know, I was playing around with Electron. So it was like a good excuse to try out Electron some more. And essentially that was it for a while. Like, it was just like 3 iframes, an input field, and like some styling to make it look nice. But like the first version had a reload button that was just an unstyled button that said reload. Just, you know, it was just for me. It didn't have to be like pretty. Since then, I've spent a very large amount of time making sure that the rotation of the reload button actually like rotates properly. But back then, like, I didn't really think much of it. I used it, and then at some point I compared my hours for comparative projects, and like using my duct tape tool, I was 60% faster than like using Chrome. And that was the point where it's like, okay, I need to do more with this. This is interesting. This is just like the crappiest first version that you can imagine. What if this was even better? What would that mean? So that's where it really got going.
And is this your full-time gig now?
Yep.
And at what point did that happen?
So it essentially like right from the get-go. So as I said, I had a web agency. I stopped doing that in 2018, then tried to give myself a month off, and I made it like 2.5 weeks. And then I started, you know, building all the stuff that you need around an application, like user management and payments and like a marketing website, a cool launch video, just to make sure that, you know, all of that got built. And then I launched in May of 2019. I gave myself like a year to make sure that it worked. And if it didn't, I would just find another job or try something else. But it did work, and I was able to pay my bills from it. So I've been doing it like full time from the get-go, which is not something I necessarily recommend people do. Like, it's not necessarily something to emulate or the way to build something like this, but it's how I did it.
Why do you think it worked for you that wouldn't work for others?
Luck.
Yeah.
I mean,
you got sales right away, or I mean, you must have just been making money right away.
Oh yeah. So Polypane is a subscription product because I do need to be able to pay groceries, and I also need to make sure
and mortgages
at some point mortgages. Yeah, and like one of the downsides of a browser is I can't like build it and then ship it and then never touch it again. Because a month later, there's a new version of Chromium. And if I don't update to that one, then like within 2 months, it's just super insecure to run. And within half a year, it's terribly outdated. And then within a year, like all your users will have more modern browsers than you. So it's something I continuously need to update. But yeah, that also meant that I had, you know, income from the get-go.
Now, you mentioned it's Electron. And I've never done Electron development before, but what I do know about Electron, I guess, is that it's like a wrapper around Chromium, right? Is that accurate to say?
Yeah. So the way you can think of Chromium is that or of Electron is that you have Chromium to display pages, and you have Node to interact with the operating system.
Okay.
And then you have a bunch of glue code to make all of that, or to orchestrate all of that. So there's Electron APIs to like create windows and resize windows. And then there's Electron APIs to, request the dock in Mac, or to add like a window menu, or to send notifications. So all of the stuff that, that you want to be able to do in an app, that's what Electron provides. And then they use Chromium on one side and Node on the other side to make that happen. And the interesting conceit there is that Node and Chromium both use V8, like the JavaScript interpreter. And what Electron does is they make sure that both the version of Chromium they have and the version of Node they have, that they use the same version of V8. So that there's a single interpreter for all your JavaScript.
And is that then what you're using for Polypane, or are you bringing your own V8/Chromium?
No, that's what I'm using for Polypane.
So is this a one-man show, or have you hired? Are you expanding? Do you just code all day? Do you do support requests all day?
I would like to be able to code all day. Yeah, so it's mostly a one-man show. I bring in freelancers as needed for the stuff I'm not good at, or don't want to do, or don't have time for. And at some point, I plan on expanding with employees. Like my previous company also had employees, which is why, like, for the first couple of years, I was fine running it on my own, because like working with people is great, but being responsible for other people's families is very stressful. But yeah, so for now it's just me with like some freelancers here and there, and then in the future I might expand.
I want to go back to the tech of it a little bit and talk about it, like the UI of it. It's a very nice UI. It looks like a browser with a lot of extra features.
Thanks. Yeah, that's the idea.
Yeah. If you told me it wasn't Electron, I would believe you, because it doesn't really look like Electron to me. I mean that in a good way. But I'm curious, like, what goes into developing the UI of a browser? What are you using?
Yeah, so all the browser UI is React. So it's just another web page. Like it's like turtles. Like there's web pages in web pages in web pages, and that's all there is. Interestingly enough, like other browsers are also more and more built with JavaScript. But yeah, so the UI is just all React, outputting HTML with just plain CSS for styling. So as I said, I started this in 2015. Back then it was React 0.14 that I was working with. And right now it's React 18, so I'm just keeping it up to date. But there's a lot of layers.
TypeScript?
No TypeScript. I am not a trained computer scientist. I just play one on the internet. Like when I started, TypeScript wasn't a thing. And then adding it to a project that's already underway for like 5 or 6 years at that point, for just me working on it, doesn't really, like, the value proposition isn't that strong. I think, like, everyone's fine to disagree with me on this, and that's fine. But like for me, it was like, I can spend a lot of time adding types to the code that just I myself am writing and reading all day, and that's not gonna give me a lot. So not yet. If I have more people, undoubtedly that equation will change.
Nick is smiling, but he's actually crying on the inside. Me over here, I'm smiling, but I'm actually smiling on the inside as well, because I think that's entirely reasonable and a sound choice. Who wants to spend time adding types when you could actually be pushing your product forward? Nick?
I think Nick is types, now increasingly scared of like clicking any of the buttons in Polypane.
Yeah. And Nick, you were just saying how well this thing works, right? It's a very nice software. It looks good, runs well.
I was excited when we were having you on, Killian, and then Jared was like, yeah, I'll join and be a wingman. I'm like, yes, we're going to talk about this browser that's written in React and I presume TypeScript. And now you just gave Jared all this fodder. And I know, it's okay.
We'll just have to lean into it.
Yeah. Yes.
Your reasoning is totally sound. My only pushback, I guess, on that, and it's not a lot of pushback, would be like, yeah, it's just yourself, but it's also yourself from years past that you have to remember all of these things. And it might help with that, but I also understand like the ROI isn't very apparent going back and and adding them after the fact. So yeah. I can see that.
There was an entire world of applications that existed before TypeScript, and they were fine, Nick. Like, we're all big boys and girls. We can handle ourselves, and we just write good software without it. It's not that hard.
Nope.
Yeah, false. Sometimes you just want a little type coercion, like just a little.
TypeScript accounts for that.
You have to ask. Yeah, if you ask it for permission, sure, I'll let you do a thing that you could have done without me.
Just cast it as any, and then you're good.
Sorry, Nick, we got you double teamed here.
I don't want to play anymore. I'm going home.
Well, then we can switch gears, because like the thing that makes Polypane feel native-ish isn't React, but is actually like a lot of CSS, because there are a lot of things that like native applications do that web pages don't do by default, that you can spend time on to make sure that your Electron app feels much more native. And that's things like making sure that users can't select all the text, because that's not something you can do in like a regular app. If you press Command A in Keynote, it's just the text on your page that gets selected and not all the buttons. If you press something, usually something happens on key down and not on click, on key up. But on the web, like you can click a link, and then as long as you hold down the mouse, nothing happens. And then when you release, something happens. So that's webby. But on a desktop app, as soon as you press down, the action happens. So it's all these little things that make sure that the interactions that you have in the app, that they are like appy instead of webby. And you can do that like with any framework. Just need to make sure that you pay attention to it. And then there's also like stuff you don't realize. Like whenever you have a file, like a menu item in a menu, and this works on all operating systems, as soon as that menu item ends with 3 dots, like an ellipsis, it means that clicking that menu item will open a dialog of some sort. And this is true for all applications. And you probably never realized that. And like there's not like a welcome to macOS. If you see a menu item with 3 dots, this is what happened. It's just something that, that is there. And you as an app developer need to pay attention to stuff like that to make sure that, you fit into all these things that users like either consciously or unconsciously expect from apps. And it's fun doing that. And it's fun doing that across platforms because things are slightly different. And then some things are just very unspecified. Like a thing that I still struggle with is like the casing of menus. Like that's just all over the place, including in like first-party native apps. Like do you use capital case or do you use like sentence case? It's just, whatever feels right in the moment. I just need to make sure that I'm like consistent.
Well, friends, I have something special for you because I made a new friend, Tamar Ben Sharkar, Senior Engineering Manager over at Retool. Okay, so our sponsor for this episode is Neon. And as you know, we use Neon, but we don't use Neon like Retool uses Neon. Retool needed to stand up a service called RetoolDB. Tamar can explain it better in this conversation, but RetoolDB is powered by Neon. Okay, they have a service called Fleets. It is a service that manages enterprise-level fleets of Postgres, serverless managed fleets of Postgres. And RetoolDB by Retool is powered by Neon Fleets. Okay, Tamar, take us into how Retool is using Neon for RetoolDB at large.
So one big problem we had with Retool, we wanted users to have value, production value as soon as possible. And connecting to a prod DB in a new tool is not something that people will do lightly.
No.
But they're much more likely to then dump a CSV into Retool. And so because of that, we said, okay, well, what if we just host databases on behalf of users? And then they can get spin up really fast. And we really saw that take off. Problem we had is we didn't have a big team. We couldn't spin up a new team to support this feature. So what do we do?
Yeah.
And so we were looking, okay, what are the options out there? And we found Neon. Neon is a serverless platform that manages Postgres DBs. And so okay, that's interesting. Let's kind of look in further. What's kind of really unique about them is you really only pay for what you use, which is exactly the use case that we have, right? Because we want to provide this to everybody. Not everyone uses it. Not everyone uses it all the time. And so if we had to us manage a bunch of RDS instances, for example, right? Basically we'd have a whole infra team to support, figure out, okay, what are they on? How do we do? Try to have some kind of greedy algorithm to get all the data in the fewest amount of instances as possible, right? This is now a hard problem. That's not kind of a core value, right? A core value is just kind of providing that database. And we don't want to kind of go into, we're not like an infra team. We don't want to kind of get in that game. I think what's really great is that, okay, well, one big kind of risk when you think of going in third party is the cost. We're giving this free to all users. We have 300,000 databases right now, right? We can't, especially as we were rolling this out to begin with, right? We didn't know for sure how people would respond, right? And we can't all of a sudden have a couple $1 million at the bank for this without kind of seeing kind of the activation that it has on our users.
So it's kind of obvious, but what was the appeal of Neon?
What was really appealing to Neon, it spits out to zero. And so because of that, right, it really kind of reduces the cost. And so really, it's really exactly only what we spend. And there's really actually not a way to actually spend less money, even if we're hosting it ourselves. So you're removing all the people cost, right? Because let's say we're using an RDS, we have to figure out ourselves, right? Basically what Neon is doing, right? How to bucket all the instances together, how to bucket the usages to have as few instances as possible, right? To scale up and down depending on what's going on. And now we sort of don't have to worry about any of that part, but still get kind of the cost benefit. And so really kind of was out, it's a win-win.
Okay, win-win. Always a good thing. I like win-win-wins, but okay, fine, win-win. If it were not for Neon and their offering of fleets of Postgres and how they're essentially your serverless Postgres platform, where would Retool be at with RetoolDB without Neon?
Well, we would have to have at least a fully staffed team, on call burden would be a challenge. I think we have to spend a lot of time on, making it sustainable. And that's, a whole, other sets of concerns that we don't ever think about. First of all, it's a team of engineers, right, which is not free. So everyone's salaries, right? So let's say probably a team, 8 to 10 people, easily only focus on this. And then it's saying, okay, well, does the revenue of RetoolDB offset the cost, even of just the engineers? So, that's step one. But I think even before then, right, you'd have to set up this team before you even had the product. Databases and, having them the way that Neon has them, right, suspend to zero, having, warm spares that they're, ready instantaneously when you, log on to Retool, those things aren't free. And even if we tried to do an MVP, right? There's the kind of basic functionality that needs to exist that we all have to start from scratch. And that would be a huge commitment to this. And I think we would have it would come out a year later because we'd have to do a lot more validation to know that it would have been worth it right before we started. Here, we were able to quickly try it out, see that it was effective, and then grow it from there because the cost was very low. And that really gave us a lot of flexibility of also testing out different features and different flavors of it.
Okay, so RetoolDB is fully powered by, backed by, managed by Neon. Neon Fleets, neon.tech/enterprise. Learn more. We love Neon here at Changelog. We use Neon for our Postgres database. We enjoy every single feature that Tamar mentioned for RetoolDB, but we use it at a small scale, a single database for our application. They use it at scale. One single engineer propped it up, manages it. That's insane. They would have never been able to do this without Neon. RetoolDB would have cost more and may not exist without Neon. Okay, go to neon.tech, learn more, or neon.tech/enterprise.
Well, here is a feature request that exists at the cross section of operating system consistency and keyboard shortcuts. So on Mac OS, every browser, except for Polypane, I believe, will switch tabs using Command Shift left bracket and right bracket.
There's like 5 different ways to switch tabs, but I'll add the 6th.
I see in your shortcuts that there is a command option right and left, like using the arrows.
Yeah.
That's in your list of browser or your tab shortcuts, which works just fine. But Safari users like me, it works in Chromium-based browsers, Firefox also. So let's add one more, Killian. Sure. Just a feature request.
Yeah.
You know, when you get to it, no rush.
What was it again? Like four keys that you need to press?
No, it's just 3.
Just
Command Shift left square bracket to go left a tab.
Wow.
Command Shift right square bracket to go right tab. The reason why this is nice is you don't have to actually leave home row to put your hands down on those little arrow keys at the bottom right hand corner. It's actually faster.
Oh, yeah.
You're just right there.
Fair enough.
So, you know, just when you get to it, no rush. You know, I'm still on my 14-day free trial, so.
I'll also add Vim bindings at some point.
Okay, now we're talking. You know that's on Nick's list of questions, because for sure.
I mean, you wouldn't be the first people to request it.
I think that's slightly more difficult than this particular keyboard shortcut, but you'd have to tell me.
Yeah.
Because it's Chromium, right? I believe there's a way to run Chrome extensions. So could you just install things like Vimium?
Yes and no. So the thing is that the extension code in Chromium, even though it is all JavaScript under the hood, it is very much tied to Chrome's processes. So Chrome, for example, has the concept of a tab, but Electron doesn't have the concept of a tab. It just has the concept of a web contents, which is like a thing that renders web content. The result of that is that Electron has to re-implement like essentially all the APIs that the Chrome extension API has to make sure that you can map that not to tabs, but like through the API pretending your web contents are tabs and then into Electron. Now that isn't complete. So Electron doesn't implement all the APIs. Some of them wouldn't make sense. Some of them are very difficult. Some of them are very like dependent on how you actually want the thing to work. And then there's also manifest v3, which is like, let's re-implement it all over again in a very different way. So right now, Electron has some support for a subset of manifest v2 APIs, and then a much smaller subset of support for manifest v3 APIs. The result is that there are some extensions that work, but many also don't because they use APIs that just haven't been implemented yet and that also can't be implemented in user space.
Sounds complicated. Sounds tricky.
It's tricky. I am using like a third-party library to add some additional APIs called Electron Chrome extensions. So if that's something you want in your Electron app, you can check that out. It has like a specific like non-free license for commercial software, which is fine. And then I'm also adding some APIs myself, so I'm trying to expand that project as well.
Why don't you share some more of the nerdier, tiny little things that surely Nick doesn't know about, like the features that you've toiled away at, but maybe are hidden or people don't know?
Yeah, so there's Web Vitals testing in there?
No.
Okay, so you can turn on Web Vitals testing. In the top right, there's like a 3-line menu. If you open that up, you can show Web Vitals. And what that does is it adds a little icon at the bottom of each pane that you can hover to show your Web Vitals once they're recorded. And then the neat thing is that will also get the public crux data for any public URL. So your localhost won't be in there, but any public URL, Google collects Web Vitals data, and then you can query that API for averages. So you can and I switch between them depending on the pane size. So you can compare like your experience with the average of the world and then see like, okay, 80% has a good CLS score, and then like the remaining 20% is acceptable, or 15% is needs improvement, and then 5% is bad, and that's fine. But for some reason, on my device, I'm always scoring in the poor category. So why is that? And then you can further find the elements causing the CLS by clicking the icon in the Web Vitals panel. And that works for all the core Web Vitals, and then I also show like the other Web Vitals. So that's a neat little feature.
Yeah.
And it's particularly interesting to have that crux data, because like we're all developers. Like before the show started, we were discussing like how recent our MacBooks are. Mine isn't, but it's still like, probably top 10% of performant devices. And that means that like in regular usage, I'm never going to run into Web Vitals issues. I'm always going to be in that green area because my device is super fast. But seeing that crux data, you can see, actually, my device is super fast, but it's just like 50% of the people that visit this page that have the same experience that I have. And you can act accordingly. You can see what you should be focusing on and what's worth focusing on. So that's a neat feature. You can press Command G, I think, for guides. And that will add...
Toggles the rulers.
That will add rulers to all your devices. And then you can have like grid overlays or column overlays. So you can be like pixel perfect. Yeah, I mean, I could go on.
We were just letting you just go. Keep going.
Sure. So there's also an option to overlay an image on top of a pane. So if you have a design, or if you make a screenshot, then you can put that on top of your pane and see the differences. And then like any way you want. So there's an onion skin where you can drag like left and right. There's a mode where you can highlight the difference between the two images. So like anything that's different will be highlighted, and the rest will be either black or gray. You can see them side by side, just giving you all sorts of options to compare to an image. But then what a lot of people also want to do is compare to other web pages. So you can also do that. You can have two panes, and then for one pane, you can turn off the navigation sync. So that will prevent that pane from having its URL updated to match all the other panes. And what you can do then is have like a production site and a staging site next to each other. And then every other interaction can still be synced. So you can still be like clicking on the same things or typing the same things, and it'll happen on both sites, but it'll actually be different URLs. So you can use that to make sure that staging still works the same way, or maybe you're like re-implementing a design in a new framework or whatever, and you need to make sure that there's no like huge differences. So that's a neat feature that a lot of people ask for. And then like what I really like is all the different emulation options that Polypane has. So there's like dark and light mode, of course, but there's like 7 other media features that you can also develop for that will make your site better for all sorts of users. So you can emulate forced colors, which is a Windows mode that changes all the colors on the screen to a predefined palette. So your website, but also the start bar and all the apps, they'll be like everything is now green text on a black background and links are yellow. And then the entire operating system is like that, including your website.
Yeah, it's funny. I just turned that on changelog.com/news, which is our newsletter, which exists on a web page, but also gets a different rendering of it gets sent out via email to a bunch of people. And that email, especially in Outlook specifically, I think Outlook 365, I don't know, the online version of Outlook, Microsoft just overrides all your CSS and makes it look. And it's funny, when I turned on forced colors on that pane, it looks a lot like our email looks inside of Outlook, because like all the links ours are green, but now they're blue, and it just overrides everything. And it's like, well, can I still read it? And the answer is yes. So I'm happy right now. But
yeah, so usually the issues you run into with forced color mode are things like SVG icons that haven't changed, or that changed to the wrong color, or when you have like when you have a slightly more design where different parts of the site have like different background colors, and that's what you use to differentiate different parts. Well, that differentiation is gone when all the background is black. So what you want to do for that mode is to add some borders, and they can be transparent, and that means that you don't see them whenever you just visit your site like normally. But then you turn on forced color mode, and forced color mode overrides the color of the borders. So they go from transparent to like green. And now suddenly you have that differentiation back for people using this mode. And it's like essentially a zero cost feature to improve your web page for like the most recent numbers I have, 1 in 25 people using Windows have this on. Like it's not a huge number, but it's probably significant if you are like, you know, we want to have 98% browser support, which is like a common value that people strive for. Well, this is like 4%. So it's well within the range of things you would want to realistically support. And it's not a lot of work to do. And using Polypane, it makes it really easy to test this and to just quickly make sure that, you know, do I need to add a border here? Okay, I'll add a border and move on with my life. So that's, and there's like reverse contrast, there's print styles, there's reduced motion, there's reduced data, which isn't actually a thing yet, but I'm hoping it will be soon. That's a way for users to tell you that they would prefer not to use all the data to load your web page. So, you know, don't autoplay videos, don't load like multi-megabyte background images, stuff like that. So that makes it really easy to test all these permutations. And I think that's really powerful.
One that I really like that I'm just seeing is automatic dark theme. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking of that as like an extension like Dark Reader or Noir that would automatically apply dark theme, and I can see how my page would change. I can see just on my dark theme itself. Yeah, it slightly changes things, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, so also dark mode is actually a built-in Chromium version of that Dark Reader extension. Oh. They shipped that for Android, I think, a couple of years ago, and then they shipped emulation for it, I think, last year somewhere. And I only added it recently because first I was like, well, you know, it's automatic dark mode, so like you're not gonna be able to design for it because it's a bunch of heuristics that Google has decided to add to light mode websites if they don't have a dark mode. So that like there's nothing you can do if it looks bad. Like you can try, but there's not like guidelines. But then one of my users, they requested it and they were like, yeah, but like people are gonna use this, so I need to make sure that I can see what it looks like. Even if I can't influence it super well, I need to see it. I'm not gonna like design for it, but I need to at least, you know, have an easy way to see what's going on.
So this person is a masochist probably. Like, well, you know, it's just pain. You're just gonna feel the pain. You can't affect the pain, but you want to feel it.
But they're right. And you know, that's one of like the many learnings of Polypane. It's like I can have opinions, but users are probably right.
Oh, I just realized there's a very nice pun there with the Polypane, because I'm actually over here. I went quiet for a moment because I'm over here like toggling all these emulators on and seeing how my website doesn't look good in various ways. I'm like writing notes. I'm like, okay, fix this. I'm feeling some pain. I'm feeling like the iOS app developers right now, you know, in light of the new iOS 18 personalization stuff. Mm-hmm. You know, I spend like all this time and money on a very nice app icon and someone's just going to like turn it green mono. Yeah, exactly. They're just going to crank up some sort of like neon green on it. And they're like, no, I don't want to know. I don't want to know. Do what you want to do on your device, but don't tell me about it. Yeah.
I was going to bring that up specifically as like, this is a time for users to really mess up designs with all of this.
That's all right. Give the users the power back. Why not? Until they can't find your button and they're like, your button disappeared, you know? It's like, well, you turned on that toggle.
Yeah. I mean, this is a total rabbit hole, but one thing I was just thinking of is like, you know, I can turn any app, any brand's color. I can turn the YouTube logo this bright pink color or this red color, or right now I have it as a gray color. I'm running the developer beta. And like, is that a security risk that I'm no longer confident that looking at a phone that is the official YouTube app or official whatever?
So the developer beta can now also hide the app names, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
So I'm sure you could do like a PWA with like a bank logo and no name.
For sure. But you got to guess the right color. I mean, because it's your own device, like unless you hand your phone to somebody else, you can trust the color scheme on your own device because you probably set it, right?
But it applies broadly to every app.
I know, but like as a malicious actor, you'd have to guess the color of gray that you're using or something, right? In order for you to sneak on something that's not the actual YouTube app. Is that what you're saying? Like I can have a non-YouTube app that looks like the YouTube app. It's just gray.
I don't know what I'm saying, honestly, like, because it's really hard with that. But like, if I wanted to do that, like Killian said, I would just have a website that loads the regular YouTube logo in hopes that it would apply the filter in the same way for whatever, and then it would just not stand out.
Here's the flaw in that technique. Nobody installs PWAs.
That's true.
Come on. Oh, too bad. You almost had a good one.
So Killian, what's coming up for Polypane? Any exciting features coming that you want to talk about?
So I released Polypane-19 like roughly a month ago, like 3-4 weeks. And that was a major version. So major versions for Polypane, I have a completely arbitrary rule, but whenever I upgrade the Chromium rendering engine, that's also a new major version for Polypane. And then everything in between is just 19.1, 19.2, etc. But I wanted to release Polypane-19 in April. However, there was a bug on Linux where if you had a sufficiently fast Linux device, the Electron apps would crash when you maximize them. Now, this wouldn't replicate in virtual machines because of some race condition and them not being fast enough to trigger them or whatever. So it took a while to get that like reproducible and sorted by the wonderful Electron team. But that meant that like my 19 release got like pushed out. And now we're like a month later, and the next version of Electron just got released yesterday. So I'm in the middle of preparing the release of Polypane-20 so that we're back with like the most up-to-date rendering engine, Chrome 126. However, that means that I haven't had the chance or the time to build cool new features yet. But I'm just going to release it because I think keeping that rendering engine up to date is worthwhile in itself. And, Polypane users deserve a breather as well. Because if I just keep releasing like 10 new features every month, maybe that's going to be annoying for them if I just keep doing that. So I'm going to do a small release.
We want more.
I have plenty of plans for the rest of the year, but this one is going to be small. One neat thing that I've built for this release is like a very common accessibility problem that people find is where developers think they're doing the right thing, but that actually ends up being annoying to users. And it's specifically, say you have a link with an icon in there, and then that link goes, for example, to the homepage. So in that link, you have the text home, and then you have an image of like a cute little house. But because you're a good developer, you know that images need alt attributes. So it's a cute little house, so you give it the alt attribute of home. So we see that icon or that link, and it's like a cute little icon and home. It's clear that's a link to home. But if you then go to that link with a screen reader, what the screen reader is actually going to say is home. Because it's going to add that alt text to the rest of the text of the title. And that's annoying. Like, do you want to go to home? No, it should just say home. So I had to write something where, like, for a given, and that thing that's read out is called the accessible name. And I show that like throughout Polypane, like in the outline panel, you have an overview of your headings and your links. That all shows the accessible name. So that's the name that gets sent to assistive technologies. And that's also the name that Google thinks your elements have So that's the thing you should care about, not necessarily what you see on the screen. But I wrote a function that takes a string like that and then figures out like how much duplication or how much repetition is happening inside of this string. So, and that's actually, it's a very interesting problem, because if you look at the sentence home, home, like it's trivial to see like, yeah, that it says home twice, but try programming that. Like it was pretty complex, but then that also made it fun. So I made something that like it walks along the characters, and then as long as there's a match for this substring further along in the string, it keeps growing until there's no longer a match. And then it moves on to the next section, because you can have like multiple repeating parts, and that's also not good. And then if there's no match, it just tries like the next set of characters. So I wrote that, and now I have a really cool function that gives me like a percentage of the repetition inside a string, and then also the repeating segments. So now I can just tell people like, your accessible name says home twice, which is nice. It's one of those things where like if you say it out loud, it's a super small feature. Like, yeah, thanks browser, I see that too. I'm not an idiot. I can see home, home. But then actually, converting that to code is complex. But now it's something I use it in all the places where I show accessible names. And it also works for like more complex repetition. So it actually is really helpful. And it also, because it's a warning, it's much easier to see if you're just scanning through all your headings. So that's coming.
Very bold of you to not have AI on your roadmap in 2024.
I appreciated that, actually. He wrote an old-fashioned fuzzy string matching function.
Yeah. AI is interesting. So my target audience is developers. And AI is notoriously bad at being correct. And so the combination of that is I could spend a lot of time building like a super fancy like Polypane Copilot or AI assistant that you can ask questions to. But then if it gets one question wrong, a user is never going to use that feature again. And the probability of it getting it wrong at some point is like 100%. Yep. So it doesn't make sense for me right now to work on AI features because it would just be wasting time. Maybe that changes at some point, but there's other stuff I don't like about the way AI things are going right now. There's huge issues with like copyrighted materials. There's very huge issues with energy usage and sustainability that I just don't feel comfortable with pushing onto people. I don't think that's going to be the right way to do this. So I'm waiting it out. And I think, yeah, we'll see. Like I use GitHub Copilot and it's very useful. But yeah, like it does lie. It does come up with stuff that doesn't exist. And I can recognize that and deal with it. But yeah, so it doesn't feel like the right time or the right thing for now.
Yeah, definitely. It feels like I was mostly joking and fulfilling an obligation to bring up AI on every show, just like TypeScript and Vim.
It's one of those things where
he's a 3-trick pony.
So I'm like of two minds of like, should I write a blog post on the Polypane blog where it's essentially like, we're not going to do AI for now for these reasons. So like, quality of the answers, sustainability, copyright issues. Like, is that a thing that I should do? Like, I feel strongly about that. And what I've seen from the users that I interact with, they're mostly in this camp as well. But then like the internet at large seems to think that AI will solve all our problems and we don't need junior developers anymore. So, am I, I don't know. What do you think?
It'll kill your VC prospects if you do write that post.
He's bootstrapped and profitable, right?
Yeah,
who needs VC?
I haven't needed a VC in the last 5 years.
I think if you feel strongly about it and you'd like to stake a claim, then you should absolutely write that blog post. It's better than people just thinking maybe you're sleeping on it or are apathetic. Like you're actually like, no, this is our stance. Plus, you can also just give that to people like Nick when they ask you about AI features. Be like, here's our stance on AI. You know, I don't know. I would write it if I were you. Actually, I probably wouldn't because I always talk about writing stuff and I don't write it. So I probably wouldn't write it if I were you. But if I were not me being you, if I were actually you, you should write it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, then again, like that blog post would be less inflammatory than if I wrote a blog post that's here's why we don't use TypeScript.
Yeah, that one you need to write. And you should name drop Nick Nisi specifically in it. Then we'll have a good old fashioned flame war.
I think it's fine. It's fine.
Is this fine, dog?
One question I did want to ask is you said you've been working on this full time for a couple of years now, and so that got me thinking like how you know if this is the main thing you're working on, how you stay on top of features that are good for developers, like web developers specifically, because you're not technically working on a lot of web development if this is your full-time thing. But then you are because this is built on a lot of web technology. So then it got me asking, can you use Polypane to build Polypane?
No, and I hate that.
Yeah.
Why not?
Well, because then it would be like websites inside websites, inside websites, inside websites. But yeah, so one of the things in Polypane is that like whenever you're hovering over something, you can just press Option and it will inspect that element for you. Like it'll give you like a tooltip and the image dimensions, and the tooltip will have like the color and the dimensions and if it's grid or flex and all these things that are super useful to quickly see. And I can't use that myself, and it's incredibly frustrating. Because I do it all the time, and I'm like, why isn't it working? Oh, wait. So, yeah. But, so I do stay up to date because I need to implement a lot of this stuff. So, like in the past week, I implemented support in my DevTools for starting style, which is a new thing that lets you animate things when adding them to the DOM, which previously wasn't possible, like without JavaScript, where you would like add them to the DOM, but they would be hidden, and you would add a class name after it's been added to the DOM, but not too fast because then it counts as the first paint. Lots of complexity. Now you can just say like, this is the style, but this is the starting style, and the starting style is opacity 0, and the regular style is opacity 1, and there's a transition. And now when you add that element to the page, it will automatically fade in. And that's super nice. And I needed support for that in the DevTools, or I wanted support for that in the DevTools. So I needed to build that. And in order to build that, I need to understand how it works. In order to understand how it works, I need to build a little prototype that I could then also use for testing the feature. And the result is that when I launch Polypane 20 early next week, that will be one of the first browsers that has support for starting style in the DevTools, because Chromium doesn't have that yet.
Nice.
So that's how I stay up to date. I need to build all this stuff.
That's awesome. And sad that, you know, presumably the number one Polypane fan can't use Polypane for their day-to-day work.
I mean, I can use it for the website, which I spend a lot of time on as well. So it's not a total loss.
Yeah.
But it is literally a daily frustration for me.
You could have had a free license too. I mean, it's just such a shame.
So Jared, you've been using it for 45 minutes.
Longer than that now, almost twice
Yes,
that.
almost
I've
twice
been
that.
clicking through. I've been clicking around the entire show. That's why I've only been halfway paying attention. No offense, but I'm kind of engrossed. Yes, you were going to say something beyond just the fact.
Yeah, I was going to ask, like, what is there some killer feature that might entice you to keep it or add it to your collection of web browsers on
my repertoire?
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it's mostly just like a lot of nice little things. Obviously, using Brave monthly is free, so it's going up against that. Whereas Polypane is going to cost me $9 a month on an individual plan, $39 a month on a business plan. So anytime you're competing with free, you have to provide a lot of value, I think. And it's definitely a lot of little things that I'm enjoying. Even just clicking through on the debug tools and just toggling them on and off and just seeing what happens is pretty cool.
Again, like I haven't even mentioned that there's like 40 different debug tools.
I know that because I've been clicking through them as we go. I'm like, holy cow, there's so many things. Simulators. I found, this option click thing that you just told us about is totally rad. And I can see the accessible name there for some of our stuff. At the end of the day, it has a lot of stuff that I like as a web developer. And so definitely interested. I'm going to use I got 13 and a half days left on my free trial. And I'm going to keep using it and see at the end of it if I'm like, you know what, it's worth paying for or maybe not.
Yeah,
so
that's the way to go.
The jury's still out. Yep.
Nice.
Of course, Nick, you'd probably just have your boss paying for it, right? Easy decision.
Me?
Yeah.
I have been paying myself.
Out of pocket?
Out of pocket. I just looked up since October 28th of 2021. So if it
Don't you work at a well-funded company, Nick?
Going up against free on those things. So.
All right. I assume, Killian, that a lot of your customers are businesses, aren't they?
I mean, I have a pretty healthy mix of like freelancers, individual developers, where I don't always know if they pay for it themselves or their employer pays for it.
Right.
Yeah, I think a fair number do pay for it themselves for various reasons. Like there's the boss doesn't think it's worth it, all the way to I'm afraid to ask, to I want to use it for personal projects, so it's mine, it's not theirs.
Yeah.
And then on the other hand, like I have enterprise customers that just take many licenses at once. So it's a pretty healthy mix. I do try to educate like individual developers like about business purchases, because if I don't, they'll compare it to like their Spotify premium license or account.
Yeah, exactly. Anytime you're like, compare it to a cup of coffee, it's like, don't do that. Don't compare it to your cup of coffee.
No, so I'm trying to help them, like, one, make the case towards their employer, but then also help them realize that, you know, if they save probably 10 minutes per month using Polypane, then it's already paying for itself. So that should be an easy equation, at least for your manager. For your manager, it should be like a no-brainer. And then if it's worth it for you personally, that's a different discussion. And that's also not something I can tell people, because it's your money.
Yeah.
But if it's like your manager, like they're already paying for your time. So if you get more done in the same time, you are more valuable. And you're probably significantly more valuable than the $9 per month that a Polypane license costs. So that's a pretty easy equation to make. And then, yeah, it lands for some and it doesn't land for others. And it also differs because, of course, at least here in Europe, you can't just get rid of people that quickly, but you can get rid of tooling quickly. So, you know, if budgets get tighter, then it's easier to get rid of tooling than to get rid of people. So, yeah, so you do see that if there's like a slight economic downturn, like the beginning of COVID, or late last year when all the big companies decided to fire everyone because of AI or whatever. Yeah, so I do see that, because tooling is just one of the places or one of the things that gets called first. But yeah, other than that, pretty broad spread.
Yeah. I like paying for software. I'll be honest. Like, if I'm going to invest in something and learn all of your shortcuts, the thousands of shortcuts, and all of that.
So many shortcuts. Yeah.
Then I want to have a safe, a warm and fuzzy feeling that it's going to be around in a year. For free tools, that's less the case in a lot of situations. So I like that personally, just knowing that like there's a lot of hard work that went into building something like this. I would love to have an idea like this someday and do it too. Not a browser, but
I mean, so I also see that as like it's a subscription, and that's annoying, but it's also like a mutual promise. Like, as long as you keep using it, I'm going to keep updating it, and this is the way to make that work. And because it's a browser, there's not really another way to make that work, I think. But I fully intend to keep my promise for many, many years. I usually jokingly say, like, when I launched version 1, I had a roadmap of 5 years worth of features. And now we're 5 years along, and I have a roadmap of 5 years worth of features.
Nice.
So
yeah,
never ends.
Yeah. Another tool I was just thinking about this with was Raycast. Raycast is like a tool that I use day in and day out now.
Mm-hmm.
I was an Alfred user for a long time, but I liked the appeal of Raycast because you could build extensions in JavaScript, and it's got a lot of like, it just like Sherlocked a lot of other apps that I would be or was using, things like window management and all of that. But there was no way to pay them, so I felt like I'm typing in all of this data. Am I the product here? What is going on? But then they came out with that and actually made it appealing with like syncing, and I have at least 3 Macs that I'm always syncing everything to. So day one, that was like an immediate, like, yes, I can finally support it. I don't feel like I'm the
product,
the value here. The product. Yeah. And yeah, so I like that a lot. One more thing I wanted to bring up is we talked about this. We talked about browsers on Changelog and Friends quite a while ago, Jared, Adam, and I. And this is where I brought up Polypane in the beginning, I think. And after having presumably heard that show, you said you'd love to come on and teach us how to properly say it. Because I think that Adam specifically was having.
We kept saying Polyplane.
Polyplane.
Oh, yeah. I mean, so this is one of those things where, like, English isn't my native tongue, but in Dutch, saying Polypane it's very natural because of the repeating P. So apparently in English, the L in the middle really screws things up and makes it very difficult.
It does. I practiced a few times before hopping on here just to make sure I didn't call it Polyplane in front of you. Because I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to offend you that way.
I was hoping you would, so I could bring this up. But now I just had to unnaturally.
Oh yeah, no, I have been on top of it the entire time. You know, and now that I found the pain pun,
it's easier, right?
I'm stuck now. Yeah, I like Polypane now, and obviously at using it, like the name does make sense. I mean, it's all about the pains, you know. But yeah, just as a native English speaker, for some reason, I see that word and I just say Polyplane.
It is what it is.
It is what it is, you know.
So there is one other way to pronounce it, which isn't like the right way, but like poly is Greek, so you could also use the Greek pronunciation. So you could say Polypane.
Oh, Polypane.
Yeah, so like it's like Persephone.
It's kind of cute.
It's also like it's not Persephone, it's Persephone.
Right.
So that someone made me aware of that. Like you could say it like this way, like it's kind of fun, but then like even fewer people would get it. So it's just Polypane.
Yeah. Fair enough. I like Polypane. I think it does a little bit remind me of polyps, which is not a good association. So I'll stick with the pain factor. But cool tool, man. Congrats on the success. It's not easy to build what you built.
If you want, I have one more feature, like one more thing that might win you over, Jared.
Okay.
And that's called Portal. And I launched that earlier this year.
Okay. It's a video game?
Portal is a video game, but Polypane Portal is a different thing. So the major downside of Polypane is that it runs Chromium. Not that it runs Chromium, but that it runs only Chromium. And we're all very good web developers, so we don't just test our web page in Chromium, but we also need to test our web page in Firefox and Safari and on the Android phone that you never have charged and on your iPhone that is now like in neon blue. And those things you still need to do one by one, and that's super annoying. So you either don't do that or you half-ass it, or you wait for users to complain and tell you, like, it doesn't work on my Android phone from 3 years ago. Like, yeah, I have one of those somewhere.
All of the above.
So what if that was easier? And that's what Polypane Portal is. So what Polypane Portal does is it opens a proxy for your local host, and it makes that available on a public URL.
Okay.
And then it shows you a QR code for it. So you can open that in all your other browsers. You can open that on your phone. You can open that on your tablet. And you can have them like all spread out on your desk. And then anything you do inside Polypane happens in all of the devices around you.
Simultaneously?
Simultaneously. So you can click, you can scroll,
that's a cool
you can
demo.
type. You can even hold Option inside Polypane, and it will show the pop-ups in all of the devices. And you can even edit the styles with the Polypane Elements panel, and it will change the styles in all the phones you have and all the devices and browsers you have connected. So that means that you get to test everything in one go. So now you can actually test everything rather than having the aspiration to do so.
Very cool.
I'm giving a talk in 2 weeks, and I'm wondering how I can exploit this for having everyone.
For much gain.
Yeah.
Yeah, just put the QR code up there, and then they all load it on their phones, and then you take control of their phones.
And then you can
click stuff.
Install the PWA.
Well, so you can't really install something because you need to stay on the domain. But if you have like a URL with "never gonna give you up,"
I was just gonna say Rickroll them. I mean, that's just too easy.
Like have them go to a page and be like, "Oh, you can see this and this now," and then click a link somewhere, and boom, everyone has a Rickroll on their phone.
Make sure the conference Wi-Fi is solid and you're good to go. That's how that one backfires. It just loading spinners the entire way.
There'll be like one guy in the back that's like, "Never gonna give you."
Yeah, he'll be on the cell signal instead of Wi-Fi, and he'll load it up. That is cool. So is that Polypane portal? This has server-side implications for you?
Yeah, so there's two ways of running a portal. One is on your local network, and that means that it stays on your device and it just makes it available to all the other devices in your same network. And it shares your IP address, so it's essentially useless outside of the network. And then the other is a public URL, so it's like a funny 3-word sentence .polypane.link, kind of like a Vercel preview or a Netlify preview.
Sure.
And that's like a relatively short-lived server that then proxies everything to your device.
Very cool. Yeah, I mean, you're getting there. You're getting there. You've impressed me. I'm not sure if you sold me, but you've certainly impressed me.
Excellent.
Nick, anything else you wanted to mention before we call the show?
No, Gillian, we'll have you back on when you do the TypeScript rewrite. And
it'll be just 1.5 hours of me crying. Like, why?
While Nick laughs.
No, I think it's a really cool tool. And obviously I've been using it for years now and really enjoy it. And yeah, I'll give you the last word.
Yeah, everyone can try it out at polypane.app and let me know what you think. I genuinely enjoy getting all the feedback.
Awesome. And thanks so much. Thanks, Jared, for coming on as well. And we'll catch you next time.
That feature request I made about the macOS keyboard shortcut for tab switching, Killian already implemented it and shipped it on Tuesday as part of Polypane 20. How cool is that? I think that's pretty cool. And speaking of cool, I share all the cool stuff going on in the software world every Monday in the Changelog newsletter and podcast. Sign up for free at changelog.com/news. Thanks again to our partners at Fly.io, to our friends at Sentry for hooking our listeners up with the coupon code CHANGELOG to save $100 on the team plan, and to our Beat Freakin' residents, Breakmaster Cylinder. Next up on the pod, I'm joined by Simon Grimm from galaxies.dev to learn all about React Native, Expo, and what is going on in the world of mobile and native app development with React. Stay tuned right here. We'll have that episode ready for you next week.